Okay, after a lot of misfires this morning, I'm back. Obviously, at a different time than you would have expected me to be here, but most of you now, of course, all of you now are going to have to watch it on tape as rather than be live. All right, we're going to chat. Today is the 13th of April. We're starting chapter 12, which is on midlife. And we'll just begin with the Carl Jung quote. Carl Jung was a devotee of our good friend Sigmund Freud, and Jung had his own way of going off on what Freud had created. So there's a whole branch of psychology called Jungarian psychology with Carl Jung created. He is quoted as saying that this age group, 40 to 60, I think, it's called the afternoon of life. So your life's not over. It's not morning anymore. It's in the afternoon. So middle age is supposed to start at 40 and end of about 60, 65. The reason that title or those numbers start changing is because you hear people say 60 is the new 40 because of better health and our changing environment, that older folks like me are acting like we're younger than our forefathers acted at our age. But then again, a lot of our forefathers, this was near death, 60, 65 or something would be close to death. Certainly in the early 1900s, you wouldn't even have made it to this age group. But now, most people without some catastrophic thing like cancer can make it into their 80s. So even at 60, you're looking at another 20 years of potentially good life. So, all right. The author starts off with people between 40 and 60 talking about their midlife body image. Now, you've all heard of the midlife life crisis, which is often attributed to males who in their 40s or 50s, they've now got money, maybe the kids are out of the house, and they feel a little more concerned about the aging process. So I'll give you a perfect example. When I was a psychologist at the mental institution in Illinois, my roommate was a psychologist there as well. He was a little older than me. He had a Corvette. And of course, he was a single guy. He, at that time, had never been married. He had no children. So he was making fairly good money. And he had this Corvette. So he decided, he saw an advertisement for the Corvette Club of Springfield, Illinois. So he thought he would go check out the Corvette Club for folks who own Corvettes. So he went, and when he came back, I asked him how it was, and he said it was horrible. He was probably maybe 35 at the time. He said it was horrible. I said, what do you mean horrible? He said the youngest guy there was 55. And there was like 60 or 70 people at the meeting, and they're all 55 or older. So no more Don going to Corvette Club of Springfield, Illinois. And so that's what we usually think of a midlife crisis, that it's usually guys that, they don't look like they looked like when they were 20, and they don't feel as healthy and virile as they did when they were 20. So they try to go reinvent themselves and do something like buy a fancy sports car, preferably a convertible, and drive around and act like you're 10 or 20 years younger, I guess, except that you have money, which you didn't have when you were 20. So the body image is people taking a look at themselves, men and women, saying, wow, I'm not as attractive as I used to be. I'm more paunchy, or my curves have not so curvy. They're more blended out, or whatever the word would be. And here's a quote: female body dissatisfaction does not increase in middle age. In other words, women in this side, we're talking about women, don't put themselves down for not necessarily having the 20-year-old figure that they used to, but doesn't mean they're not investing into anti-aging products and trying to go to Pilates and make themselves have at least an attractive, what we in the United States consider an attractive figure. Because their sexual apparatus does not critically depend on blood flow, this is women, females can be just as orgasmic at 80 as they are at 20. Unfortunately, however, especially in later age, women are more apt to be turned off to sex than men. The reasons, as I have said earlier, are environmental. Being without a partner, which is a big issue. A lot of single widowers or divorcees don't have a consistent sexual partner. Having an older spouse, those who are married, with some kind of, hey, don't lay down on me here, Mr. Camera. What in the world are you doing? Well, somehow I started getting all blurry here. Come on, focus in. Well, that's what happens. You get out of your environment, things change. Okay, this is the laptop camera, which probably looks better than my more expensive one that I brought with me. I'll leave it on the laptop. One of the reasons women are not so much interested in sex is if they have an older spouse who has medical problems. And so therefore, maybe that male is not so interested either. Not having people respond to you as a sexual human being. In other words, people not seeing you at 50 as a sexual person. And menopause can indirectly affect sexuality too. Menopause, as you're all aware, is a process that women go through where they stop producing as much estrogen, and they no longer are having menstruation because of the aging of the body, and the eggs aren't being kicked out and the hormones are changing. So it's a changing period of time where males, with their ability to produce sperm, it's not really age related. There's always some lessening of ability as age goes on, but it's not dependent on hormones as women's sexual sex cells are. And then they mention, kind of silly for somebody who teaches human sexuality, that women don't produce as much vaginal lubrication when they get older. So what? Stop having sex? Duh. Go buy some lubricants, KY or something. Ridiculous. But there's a fair amount of group of people who are 40s or 50s or 60, I guess, that actually report having a better sex life. And one of the reasons is because they don't have kids in the house anymore, so they don't have to be worried about being interrupted. They can run around the house naked if they want, as long as they have their shades pulled down. Nobody's going to get upset. So the sexual thing, she doesn't really get into it much, but if you take a human sexuality course, we'll talk more about that in a human sexuality course. But basically, with that whole revision of lifestyle, with having made it in the career world, you have enough money to live on, your house is paid for, your car is paid for, whatever, kids are out of the house, it can reignite an interest in partnership with your marriage, or if you're living with somebody. So that can create another opportunity for a resurgence of sexual interest and sexual activity. So it's not that big a deal. One of the things that I talk about in human sexuality is one of the problems with people getting older and having some medical issues, that they end up in a nursing home, or they just don't have somebody else to take care of them. Like one of their kids doesn't want to, none of their kids want to take care of grandma, or I shouldn't say grandma, their parents. So they end up in a nursing home. You might find this amusing, I always do, that one of the big social issues in nursing homes are people having sex, that there's just a lot of sex going on, people bouncing around from bedrooms to bedrooms. And also, believe it or not, sexual diseases, STIs or STDs, sexually transmitted infections that increase in nursing homes. And I have a cute little video about a doctor who comes up with this rap song to talk about elders and use of condoms, and because obviously now we're not worried about pregnancy, we're just worried about STIs. So the use of condoms is not for birth control, but for disease control. This chapter kind of bounces around a little bit, but it's okay. She breaks into this concept of the two types of intelligence, crystallized and fluid intelligence. Crystallized intelligence, if you remember this from intro, was your cumulative knowledge that you have learned over the years, like your places you've been, people you've known, things you've done. Those are your crystallized memories, and your crystallized intelligence can go and get those memories up pretty quickly. So if you show somebody, let's say they're in their 70s or something, you show them a picture of some wedding party that you went to with all your friends, and when you were 20, let's say 20, a person of that age can recognize everybody. They're not going to be forgetting who they are, maybe forget maybe a name, but they recognize all that. And fluid intelligence, and which feeds into a memory pathway as well, is more the quick thinking, the ability to be very agile in your acquisition of information. For instance, one of the examples they use in intro is if you're a nurse and you're 55 years old and a nurse, you're very competent, you've been practicing your skill for 30 years, but what you can't do as quickly as you could have done back when you were 25 is pick up new skills. There's a new machine, there's a new process that we have to do, and you're just not going to pick up that new skill as quickly as a 25-year-old. But your old crystallized knowledge, your old crystallized memories are easily. You still remember the things you've been doing for 30 years. It's just adapting to new things that you might be a little bit slower. And so one of the questions I also remember from the study guide is, hey, my 62-year-old mom wants to go to graduate school. What should I tell her? And the answer is, go for it. If you're ready to go, do it, because your brain is not quitting. It's not incapable of learning new information and building up on a degree, whether it's a master's or a doctorate level. Many of the students, when I was in doctoral program, were middle-aged people because now they have a little more money and their kids are not demanding that much time, as much time as they used to, so they can get away and start working on their PhD. So yeah, here it mentions crystallized IQ declines because our forgetting rate. So the IQ, the memories are still there, but we're not so crisp at pulling them out because of our age. I really, see if I could show this thing to you. This diagram right here, really, really interesting piece of information. What it is age-related changes in career paths of geniuses and less eminent creators. So you have two scales. One is on people who are not geniuses. Probably not many of us are geniuses. I'm certainly not. And it starts off the graph starts off when you're 30 and how your talents and your information is growing and growing, and it peaks around 50, which makes a lot of sense when you look at the lifespan in its entirety. Then after 50, it slowly sort of tapers down until 80 is what this graph shows. However, if you're a genius, you start learning on this graph at 30 and you shoot up really precipitously. And between 30, 40 is a big rise, and between 40 and 50 is a big rise. So the peak is still at 50, but it's so much higher if you're a genius. You're still driven, you're still wanting to be creative and use your mind to create things or cause things to happen. And of course, it drops off as well, but not as precipitously as the genius people. So the fact that your brain is really smart seems to affect in a very significant way how interested you are in being creative and learning new things, even though you're older. Now, I think a good example of that is my friend who's probably in his 80s now, but as late as being 76 years old, I haven't seen him in a while. he was a practicing anesthesiologist. So he was a doctor, he was a physician. And he had a big chunk of money. He did not need to work. His children were long gone and adults. At that time, he didn't even have a wife. He finally got married again, number 5. He lives in Arizona, has an apartment here, drives from Arizona to El Paso, works 5 days a week at an outpatient surgery clinic, and then drives back to Arizona. Sometimes his wife comes with him, sometimes he doesn't. That's hardcore for somebody who doesn't need the money. And he could spend the rest of his golden years with his wife having a great time traveling and doing other things. And everybody used to ask me, why do you think good old Ernie is still practicing medicine? And I said, I think he's afraid that if he stops doing it, he's going to decline mentally. And so he wants to put that off as long as possible, because of course all of us are going to decline mentally with age. But if your peak is in 50 and you're approaching 80, I mean, that's 30 years. So I think he's trying to maintain that high level of functionality because he doesn't want to lose his mental faculties anytime soon. So that's just my personal theory about it, because he doesn't need the money. It's a little bit inconvenient to his marriage, but he still does it. And he drives. I mean, he's the one that's driving between the two cities. So, but driving takes some skills too. So I think it all adds up to being mentally challenged. And if you're not, well, how many people, you guys are so young, you probably don't really see much of this. Oh, Victoria's here. Fantastic. Victoria's here after all this craziness this morning. Oh my God, what a crazy day. Anyway, thank you for joining us. I was just talking about my friend Ernie. Well, last time I saw him, he was about 76 or 77. He was still a practicing physician. He was an anesthesiologist, and he had lots of money. He had more money, knew what to do with. He has a beautiful home in Arizona. He has a condo here in Santa Teresa, and he still works. I don't know that he's still working now. He's probably in his 80s now. But I think the reason he continued to work was because he wanted that mental acuity. He didn't want to decline in his mental sharpness. So being a physician, of course, requires a lot of attention to detail. Being an anesthesiologist, he's got all these machines, somebody's being cut on, operation is going on. He has to monitor all of the vitals on the person and make sure they're getting the right anesthesia and they're not coming out of anesthesia, or they're not going so deep into anesthesia that they're going to lower their vitals and maybe be a life-threatening event. So it's something that requires you to do some thinking, and it's always different. Every patient is different, and that takes calculations and all these things that anesthesiologists do. So I really believe the reason that he continued, and I mean, even at 76, potentially you could have another 20 years. Look at old King. Well, he wasn't really a king. It's kind of weird. He's married to a queen, but he's not the king over in England. He's the Duke. Anyway, the guy married to the Queen of England died at 99. And his wife is not much younger than him, a couple years, I think. So living to 99 years old and being clear in the mind and whatever is pretty amazing. My own mother lived to be 97, and her mind was, she had an extremely good memory. Her memory was better than mine when I was in my 20s. She would say, "You ever talk to that Karen anymore?" I thought, "Karen? Who the hell's Karen?" And I remember you used to date her and you took her to the lake one time. Oh, yeah, right. I didn't remember. She could remember my girlfriends. Wow. Phenomenal memory. And she had her faculties until she was 97. You know, she died in her sleep of old age. Um, Cancer took my dad out at a much earlier age. So he might have lived a long time. His mother lived to be 97. So I'm shooting for 97. Okay. How do we keep mentally acute when we get older? Here are 3 things the author brings out, which I think would be nice to be repeated. Number 1, the most compelling research relates to the connection between being physically fit, that is, exercising, and having a well-tuned mind. Physically fit older and midlife adults consistently perform better on cognitive tests. That's the issue, I think, with Ernie. He wasn't real big on exercise. Now, we had another friend named Bill who recently died at 95. He went to the YMCA gym 5 days a week. And he took all these supplements and he was in good physical shape. And he would have lived longer than 95, but for the fact that he got cancer. He had, well, that's a whole nother story, but he had some really poor medical treatment provided to him that almost killed him on 2 other occasions. And one of them had to do with his heart. So that sort of, I take that back. I said he died of cancer. That's not true. He died of a heart attack, but he had stents put in, and I just don't think the people at this particular hospital chain in here in El Paso did him any favors. I think they poorly served him. I think he would have lived longer than 95 is my point. Okay, number 2, mental stimulation. Another thing I said about Ernie, because environmental stimulation promotes synaptogenesis. We talked about synaptogenesis, genesis meaning growth, synapses, more of the dendrites reaching out and touching another neuron. That's how we grow. You listening to this video, you're creating synaptogenic processes, hopefully, because there's a test on Friday, that is going to ask you to recall the things that you learned by reading and hopefully watching this video. So that's synaptogenesis. So yeah, mom's 62, wants to go back to graduate school. She can do it. Why? Synaptogenesis. Our mind is still capable of learning and putting into our memory available things so that we can pass an exam when we graduate. That's crystallized intelligence. The fluid intelligence, we just aren't as quick as we used to be when we were in our 20s. So it helps to be around in a stimulating environment. You know, those of us who teach, we're in a stimulating environment. We have to keep, well, we don't have to, but most of us are driven to keep up on the latest changes in our field. We meet with other professionals. We go to conferences. We're always being bombarded with new information. And that keeps us active and it keeps us, our mind quick because we're working it. The mind is like a muscle in the effect that it, you know, the more you work it, the better it is, the stronger it gets. Remember synaptogenesis? Well, you also remember synaptic pruning. And what did we say about synaptic pruning? Use it as far as your brain, use it or lose it. So if you're not doing the things you used to paint, you don't paint anymore, you used to play the piano, you don't play the piano anymore, those neural pathways that you're not using anymore, they're going to drop off. So keep yourself stimulated, whether it's at work or at home, in your personal life. Continue to listen to music, go to fiestas and things that are socially rewarding to you, and keep yourself sharp. Now, here's one you might not have thought of. Number 3, challenging life experiences promote resilient minds. What's resiliency? Resiliency is the ability to pop back from something. You hurt yourself, how long does it take you to recover to pop back? Your brain, the social and maybe intellectual side, psychological side of biopsychosocial is challenged some way. Your partner dies, or if you're a little younger than this, when we started out talking about having children changes your career path and your brain path pretty significantly. And that's a good thing. I mean, it's not good to have tragedy in your life, but that reminds me, if you lead a sheltered life, what do I mean by sheltered life? A life that didn't have a lot of challenges. What? I have challenges big time every day. Well, then this is not talking about you. But assume you didn't. Assume you had parents who had a lot of money and they made your life very comfortable. And you didn't have any really big things happen to you. So maybe you're 50, 55 years old. Your parents are still alive. No one close to you has died. Because you have money, or you have your parents' money, whatever, you're well off, you can do things, you can grow. Nothing really traumatic has happened to you. Well, then you get to be 65, and then your parents die. That you are going to be less able to handle that dramatic and traumatic change in your life if you had not had challenges when you were younger. So if you were 21 or 22 and your best friend gets killed in a car accident, and 25, you lost the job that you had that you really loved and paid you well, and all these kind of traumatic challenges that could occur in your biopsychosocial development. Those things, once you work through it, you're a stronger person. In the military, we say that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So you have these challenges, your friends getting killed, you doing all sorts of things in the military that are very difficult, hard, painful, stressful, but you work through it. You're in a better position to handle adversity when you get into your 50s and 60s and 70s, when your friends start dying, your parents start dying, you're no longer working because you've retired. All these big lifestyle changes, you are more resilient. You're more able to spring back, or spring forward, I should say, when something negative happens, or even positive. I don't have to work anymore, so I quit. I retired. But to use that energy and that opportunity in a positive way and not get depressed. I know for a fact, with my friend Ernie, the physician, he had friends who were physicians and just other friends that as soon as they were like, okay, I'm going to retire, I'm going to get all this money, They retire, they get all this money. 6 months later, they're dead. You read about it in the paper all the time. People seem to be healthy, they're doing well, they retire, and within a year, they're dead. So part of that is because they don't have the challenge and they don't have the demand of that they used to have, you know. So here we go. Here's a review. People in their 40s and 50s are at the peak of their mental powers, but they will have more trouble mastering new cognitive challenges, those, of course, that involve fluid skills, and when they're under pressure to do it, because there's a timing issue. To preserve their cognitive capacities as they age, adults need to take care of their health. That's number one. Become physically fit. That's important as well. Number two, and search out stimulating work. Like in Ernie's situation, it was continuing at work. In my situation, I continue at work, but I also read a lot and checking articles out. Some of them I give to you on news you can use. And I haven't been going to conferences because they're all online, and it's not that great. That's like you and me having this one-way conversation here on Zoom. It's not like being in a room with a bunch of people and it breaks, you can talk to people. And after the daily conferences, you're going to go to the adult beverage bar and have a few adult beverages and talk about people's research and what's exciting and what's happened to them professionally, academically, and all that kind of stuff. It's really great. That, you know, all of us who are in these specialty professions like teaching really need to get out of our environment and go meet with other people who do what we do and get recharged. So that's one of the other good reasons for continuing education requirements that schools want us to do. So then there's a big discussion about wisdom, which is interesting, kind of philosophical. So let me talk about this next section, because like I said, this chapter kind of bounces around a little bit. This next section, they're talking about personality testing and personality discussions of what you find out about yourself. And so they usher in this psychological examination called the Big Five. And you take this exam, this really shouldn't call them a test or an exam, but interest inventory and on personality. So the Big Five is considered a personality inventory. That's the word that psychologists use. Inventory. It's not really an exam. It's not really a test, but it is a diagnostic tool to look at your personality. So I'll tell you the story if you didn't get it when you were in intro. When personality theory was first being developed, there was only one personality theory, and that was Freudian. And it left some people less than fulfilled with just psychoanalytical personality development. And of course, Freud had the psychosexual development. Everybody else had psychosocial, but Freud had psychosexual, 5 stages of development, right? Erikson and Piaget, everybody else had psychosocial development. Only Freud had psychosexual development because he put the 2 things together. That sexual desire and sexual drive and sexual interest all had to do with growth and developmental stages, which, and I guess in a roundabout way, that's some truth to that, but not the way he came up with it. So even somebody like me who's very much a believer in much of the analytical approach to understanding people and certainly treatment, rejects this idea of psychosexual stages. So we're more likely to go with somebody like Erikson, this book obviously follows Erikson's model. And that's how we come up with this middle age concept. And reminds me, where is our challenge of, oh, here it is. Erikson's middle age, 40s to 60s. What is the primary task? I can't even say that word, generativity versus stagnation, generativity versus stagnation. We'll get into this on Thursday, but the word is generativity, which is going out and doing something, being engaged. That's generativity, and we'll discuss that on Thursday. But I wanted to get into the psychological testing, again, inventory. Most of us think of it as testing, but it's an inventory. Testing, looking at what somebody's personality is. Okay, so an old psychologist who had a PhD student under him, he said, hey, look, I want you, this is going to be your task. He gives him a desk dictionary, because we didn't have the internet in those days. So big old, fattest, biggest dictionary he could find. And he said, what I want you to do is go through this page by page and write down every word that describes. That's what I figured. Shut up, Siri. That's your telephone talking to you for no reason. Anyway, I want you to go through this big book and dictionary and go find all the words that describe people. Things like, oh, they're an angry person, they're a happy person, they're a dominating person, they're a captivating person, they're exotic, they're erotic, they're everything that would describe a person, what we would think is some kind of personality trait. Kind, of course, all the opposites, unkind, emotional, unemotional, sympathetic, non-sympathetic, all those things. So he comes up with, 60,000 words or something. And so they tried to, this is Gordon Allport. Dr. Allport tried to narrow these things down to come up with some personality factors, a scale. And so he went from 60,000 down to 16. And of course, it's on a continuum. So let's say you are generous. You can be really, really, really generous or not very generous at all. So even though you're looking at 16 personality factors, you're really looking at 32 because you're looking at the opposite. So if somebody is like on the big 5, extroverted, well, the opposite of extroversion is introversion. An extrovert is somebody who's out and engaging people, is not intimidated by groups or having to do things like speak in front of others and meet new people. Extroverts have no problem doing that. Introverts don't like that. They shy away from that. They don't go to parties. They're not interested in doing that. They just as soon sit at home and listen to some music or watch a good series on Netflix or something like that. Where other people, now they feel more comfortable in a group and they're out, they're doing things and engaging the world, right? So Alport came up with 16 personality factors, and he very creatively called his test inventory the 16 PF, personality inventory. So you take that inventory and it comes up and it grades you along 16 personality factors. So whether you're aggressive or not aggressive, whether you're kind or unkind, I don't have the list of 16 in front of me. Here I am at Valle Verde campus all by myself in here because my computer system, well, it's not the computer, it's the internet, something wrong with the internet. So there is a personality inventory. We use it today called 16 PF. But there's another one that's more modern called the Big Five. So people didn't want to deal with 16. They just put them all into a group of big 5 personality factors. And one of the memory memes techniques that we use when we're trying to memorize more things than 5, but it works with 5. But if any of you are nursing students, and I know you are, you'll come up with these methods of using the first letter in all of these terms to create some kind of memory mnemonic to help you, like in music, the keys, every good boy does fine, EB, I'm not a music person. Acronyms, simple acronyms like FBI or something's pretty easy. So with the Big Five, you've got 2 choices. You can spell 2 different words with neuroticism, extroversion, openness, conscientiousness, and agreeableness. Those 5, that's the Big Five. So you can either spell canoe with them or one other word. Maybe I'll leave that up to you to figure out what the other word is. So, well, I can't remember what it says. Maybe she doesn't even use it. Usually in the intro book, they describe the acronyms, but I don't, now that I'm looking at it, I don't see it. Anyway, if you can remember the word canoe, then you can remember the 5 personality factors in the Big Five. Canoe is conscientiousness. The A is agreeableness. The N is neuroticism. The O is openness. And E is extroversion. So it spells canoe. So if you're a very fast, fluid thinker, think of a word with those 5 letters, N-E-O-C-A, and think of another word. Canoe is one, but there's another one too. So maybe we'll check that out on Thursday. Oh, you have an explanation. I have on Blackboard. Posted in this chapter 12. Written material. Wake up. Yeah. There is a handout called the Big Five Canoe. We've got a nice little diagram. Why it takes so long to open up, I don't know. There it is. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, which spells a different word. So I fooled you. I put it under canoe, but it's actually the other word. So you figure out what the other word is. Okay, that's where we're going to stop today with the Big Five. Now I put up information again about the getting back to attachment, which I told you is going to kind of follow us through the whole semester here. On temperament, childhood temperament. And again, this is a discussion of biopsychosocial and how they interact and how these temperamental attachments, relationships that occur in early childhood and then continue all the way up into adulthood, that these relationships, this form of attachment and relationships tend to repeat themselves in adulthood. So it doesn't mean they can't be changed, but it's something to be concerned about. And if you're being introspective in the middle age, now that you're 40, 50, 60, you're looking back at your life and you want to do things differently, you might go back and think about what kind of lessons you learned all the way up to where you are today at 50 or 60, and might make some changes in your lifestyle, because it's not made in concrete. You can change the way you relate to others, even though you had some experiences in your early childhood and adolescence and early adulthood that that you determined not to be very productive for you. Now's an opportunity for you to revisit that issue and do something differently. A lot of people in this generativity, which we'll talk about on Thursday, really feel a need to have more community impact. I mean, if you get married, you're going to have an impact on your spouse, you're going to have an impact on your children. But now at this age, it's not just your children, it's your grandchildren. And that's not even enough for you. Because if you're not working anymore, you got a lot of time on your hands. People don't want to sit around all day in the lounge chair and watch Netflix like all the rest of us are doing during COVID, gaining weight. So you start wanting and needing to be attached to more of a community than just your immediate family and your extended family. And this is when you see men and women getting involved in groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, church groups that are helping other people, because now that they've proven themselves in the workplace and they've got enough money, they don't have to work anymore. They still want to be active and they still want to do something. And the way they see it is unconsciously, I don't think they think about it consciously, is they want to leave their mark on society. Certainly they left a mark on their of influence on their spouse, their children, and perhaps the grandchildren. But many of us want to have an even greater impact with more people in a larger group. So this is part of generativity and part of the growth process of people in middle ages, middle age group. But as I say, you also know that 60 is the new 40, so it's still a little bit fluid. But people do change, especially, like we said, in the beginning, you have children, it changes your whole life. And now your children are gone, out of the house. That changes things between you and your spouse generally. And of course, you can choose what level of involvement that you have with your children and your grandchildren as well. So it does change things quite dramatically. So, Victoria, you're the sole person representing your entire class here today. Do you have any questions? The study guide's up. You may not have taken time to really start answering questions. Do you have any questions or issues?
No, not today. Maybe on Thursday about the study guide.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you checking in with all this craziness that happened this morning. The water heater went out this weekend, so I've been taking a shower in the shower stall with boiled water from the sink and adding cold water, mixing it. It's crap. Been doing that since Friday. So today the plumber finally makes it over there. So who knows what's going on in the house. And the internet wasn't cooperating. So I ended up coming here to school and doing the broadcast from here. Okay, well, thank you very much for showing up. Those of you who are listening on the recorded version. Again, if you have questions or you missed a test or somebody sent me a message about extra credit. I don't do extra credit. So what you need to do is do the best you can on your classes and your weekly exams. Now, I will have another writing assignment. That'll be the last one. So you're only going to have 2 writing assignments. And when you do that and turn it in, then I'll drop your lowest grade. So that will help your grade point average if you're worried about your grade point average. But the easiest way to keep your grade point average up is make use of the study guide. You know the test questions come off of that. And as long as you have the correct answer, no sense in writing down the wrong answer. When test time comes, you should be in really good shape. You've got the questions and the answers. And if you need help, as Victoria just said, maybe she'll have some questions on Thursday, then you got it all cleaned up. You got a study guide with all the answers. Bam, the test comes on Friday. You can take it on Friday, Saturday, or the latest on Sunday, and you're good to go. So I look through the grades. I see there are people that are missing tests. I can only suggest to you that you make those up, because if you don't, you're not going to do well in the class. I can tell you that. So help yourself. Take advantage of making up a test when most instructors don't allow you to do that. So I will, but it's on you. It's not on me. I'll mention it to you. So, all right, stay safe. Enjoy this wonderful weather. And Victoria, again, thank you for being patient with this craziness this morning. So take care. We'll see you on Thursday.